Maseches Nedarim Daf Pei. We begin the last few lines at the end of Daf Ayin. The test. Gemara is discussing what is meant in the machlokes about how you define nedarim that are inui nefesh, nedarim that are personal oppression. We saw a machlokes on the topic. The Gemara is going to go through the examples that were listed and explain what exactly the neder was. We'll have some trouble with the language of the Mishnah and pinning down exactly what the case is. So let's review. The Mishnah said there's a machlokes between the Chachamim and Rabbi Yosi. If a lady makes a neder im erchatz, im loy erchatz, if I will wash, if I will not wash, so according to Tanakama, that counts as inui nefesh, that counts as personal affliction, which qualifies for hafara. And Rabbi Yosi says this is not called inui nefesh. Then we'll get to im iskashed ve'im loy iskashed later on the daf. So first of all, the Gemara wants to know, what is the neder im erchatz? Let's go one at a time. Im erchatz. The language im erchatz, if I will wash, is not a language of a neder. You could say, kainam rechitza alai, I forbid myself to wash. We can't say if I'll wash. That is the language of a tanai, which means that there is two parts to the neder here. There's a tanai, and if I fulfill the tanai, then I trigger the neder. So what's happening here? So the Gemara tries a few attempts to figure out what's the neder, what's the tanai, and based on that, what are the two opinions, Rabbi Yosi and the Chachamim. So the Gemara's first attempt is that she says all the fruits in the world will be usher to me if I wash. So the tanai is if I wash, and the neder is all the fruits in the world will be usher to me. Now, if that's the case, that means the washing part, there's no discussion if that's inui nefesh or not. Everybody agrees that's not called inui nefesh. The question is only about the not eating any fruits of the world, because that's the neder. That's the discussions over the neder, not over the tanai. So if that's the case, so first of all, why would the Chachamim say that it is inui nefesh? What's the big deal? She could just not wash, because we're not holding now that washing is an inui. It's just a tanai. If it's not an inui, she doesn't have to wash, and she won't ask her any of the fruits in the world. And if you're talking about just the tanai itself without considering, if you're talking about just the neder itself without considering the tanai, why would Rabbi Yosi say that it's not inui nefesh? Not eating any fruits of the world is a very great inui nefesh. There's no way to ignore that. So the Gemara tries a second attempt. The Gemara wants to say, okay, the tanai and the neder are both about washing. She says, if I wash, then all hanas rechitza will be usher for me. So if I wash one time, I'm not allowed to wash anymore after that. So the difference between that and a regular, I'm not going to wash, is that she's allowed to wash once. But if she does that, then she's forbidden to wash then on after. So according to this pshat, the washing itself is considered to be an inui, and therefore you would say the machlokes between Rabbi Yosi and the Chachamim is washing considered to be an inui or not? According to the Chachamim, it is most definitely an inui because it makes her be repulsive. Rabbi Yosi is not worried about repulsivity. He says, all right, she don't wash. He's not concerned that creates repulsiveness. So therefore, not being able to wash is not an inui nefesh. That would be the machlekes. The Gemara's kasha here, though, is that the machlekes is not about the tanai. The machlekes is not about the neder. The machlekes is about the tanai. Because if you want to say that the tanai is not a big deal, so then let her just keep the tanai, not wash, and it doesn't matter what the neder is afterwards. So Rabbi Yosi, the language of the Mishnah, where it says that Rabbi Yosi and the Chachamim are arguing whether or not the tanai is, whether or not the neder is in inui nefesh, that's wrong. Even if the neder was certainly in inui nefesh, such as if she said that I'm not going to eat any fruits in the world if I wash, that's not the argument here. The argument is she able to wash that one time? Or can she withhold herself from washing that one time? According to the Chachamim, she can't not wash one time, because then she won't be able to wash at all. Therefore, she has to fulfill the tanai. She has to wash, and therefore, she's going to end up getting stuck in a iser, which is inui nefesh for sure. According to Rabbi Yosi, she doesn't have to wash. Therefore, she won't fulfill the tanai, and therefore, the neder will never bichal. But that's a machlokes about whether or not the tanai is an inui nefesh, and the language of the Mishnah is wrong, where it says that the machlokes is about where the neder is an inui nefesh. There's nothing to do with that. Even if everybody agreed the neder was an inui nefesh, this machlokes would still exist. So if the Gemara changes the case, and the Gemara says that it's got to be that what's meant when she said the neder was that if I wash today, then washing will be forbidden for me forever on afterward. According to this, all she has to do is hold herself back from washing for 1 day, and then she's fine. So the Chachamim say that's still impossible. That's still called an Inui Nefesh, and therefore she's stuck with an Inui Nefesh that she can't do. Rabbi Yossi holds, no, 1 day she can go, that's not called an Inui Nefesh, and it's fine. Now, you would still seem to be stuck with a kasha here, that they're arguing over the Tanai, they're not arguing over the neder itself, and the Rishonim say yes, that is correct. They are arguing over the Tanai and not over the neder. However, the Gemara's kasha before, we should have phrased it over the Tanai. That's not a kasha here, and there's various approaches in the Rishonim to explain why the kasha no longer applies. But the Gemara with this understanding is changing, that we could say that the argument is over the Tanai, and everyone agrees, even if we're talking about something which is a Vadai Inui Nefesh in the Neder, it wouldn't be a problem, and that's the case. The Gemara now moves on to the second half, where she says the Neder is Imloi Erchatz, if I'm not going to wash. So again, it's an if, so it has to be a Tanai and then a Neder. So what's this? So the Gemara, the simplest understanding would be, she says, if I don't wash, then I have a neder on me that I'm usher to wash forever afterwards. So the Gemara says, this doesn't make sense. What's the problem? Let her wash. She won't have the neder. Everything's happy. Everything's fine. So Gemara offers a few approaches here. The Gemara's first approach is of Yehuda, who says when she says wash, it doesn't mean wash in clean water. She means wash in filthy, smelly water, water that's used to soak flax. So that's disgusting. And then we have the same thing. She has to be menavel once in order to avoid the neder taking effect, and the question is that called an Inui Nefesh, that she has to do that nivel once? So the Gemara asks, so then let's go to the second line in the Mishnah, which is if she says neder, if I will be miskashet, that's if I'll put on makeup, or if I won't be miskashet. So the first half of that, if I will be miskashet, would be the same as if I will wash. But what does it mean if I won't be miskashet? That'll have to mean if I won't be miskashet in something which is disgusting, like if she'll use tar for makeup. So the Gemara says the term skashe doesn't make any sense there, because it's not called, you can't say I'm applying tar for makeup. That's called applying filth to your face. You can't use the word skashe, say mloy skashe. So therefore you have to come up with a whole new pshat, and the Gemara revises the entire discussion altogether. The Gemara takes it all back. The Gemara says all these ims, imerchatz, moyerchatz, imiskashet, imoiskashet, it's talking about shavua. And it's not a neder. She says, I'm making a neder that I'm not going to be miskashet, and that's what the term is im miskashet, imerchatz, im loyiskashet, im moyerchatz, it all means that she's making a shavua. So the Gemara asks, if that's true, so then why does the Mishnah call them nidarim? It should call them shuis. So the Gemara answers a few things. Either we'll say you have to change the language and say nedarim u shvuos, a neder or a shvua, and then we'll have examples of a neder and a neder of a shvua. Or it could just mean that the term neder could apply to nedarim and to shvuos. We bring a Mishnah where you see that the Mishnah says kinidrei rishayim. If somebody says that he makes a neder like the rishayim do, that works if he's talking about nazirus, carbon, or shvua. So you see that the term neder could be used for shvua accurately as well. Okay, the Gemara now has a general kasha. We'd said in the discussion earlier that it comes out that the Rabbanon's opinion is that washing is one of the Tanaim, and that's called an Inui Nefesh, that's called a personal affliction. So Gemara asks, is it true that the Rabbanon hold that not washing, withholding himself from washing, is called an Inui? It's called an affliction. We see in Hilchos Yom Kippur that it's not true. We have a Mishnah there that says is that there are 5 Inuyim of Yom Kippur, but you only get kares for the Inui of eating and drinking. If one violates the Inui of eating and drinking, that's kares. Malacha is kares as well, that it says explicitly. But the other Inuyim, one of which is not washing, there's no kares for that. So where it asks if it's true that washing is considered to be something which avoids inui, and that means that the way to do inui is by not washing, and not washing counts as an inui. So if somebody violates that, he violates the inui. So then any violation of an actual inui should be a violation of Yom Kippur's halacha of inui, and that should be mechayev kares. So how come there's no kares for washing? So Gemara answers, Rava says that if you look carefully in the Psukim, you could be medayik that there's a difference between the language of Yom Kippur and the language of Nedarim. In Yom Kippur, it says, Tanu is nafshay seichem, you, plural, should oppress yourselves. And that's something that's a group effort, and therefore should be something that you could tell on somebody that he didn't do. Like, Eating and drinking, that's something which is noticeable. It's discernible if somebody hasn't eaten. There's a weakness about him. However, not washing, as long as it's only not for too long, I guess, that he doesn't smell it yet. So that's not called something that's noticeable. That's something that's just that personally oppresses him because his feeling of being unclean, but it's not considered to be something that's a public group inui. Now that's for Yom Kippur, and therefore washing is not included in the inui of Yom Kippur. However, for Nedarim, it says kol neder kol shuas iser lana is nafesh. That's singular. A personal nefesh iser, his own personal oppression, and washing definitely qualifies for that. And the Gemara now asks a contradiction in the opinion of Rabbi Yossi in and of itself. In our Mishnah, Rabbi Yossi seems to be saying, at least the way we explained it, that not washing is not considered to be a personal affliction. It's not an inoi nefesh, something you could deal with. So Gemara has a kasha because we have a different discussion, a different Mishnah, where Rabbi Yossi seems to hold that even withholding from washing clothing is considered to be a major affliction. So if he holds that washing clothing is an affliction, how can you tell me that he holds that washing the body is not an affliction? So let's bring that brisa. So that brisa discusses what happens if there are two towns along the same river. One is upstream and one is downstream. So the upstream city has first access to the water of the river. And if they use it all up, there won't be any left to flow to the downstream town. So now the upstream town and the downstream town both have three uses for it. One is to drink for the people, another is to give the animals, that's less important, and the third is to wash the clothing, that's less important. So the question is, which uses do the people upstream have to give up on to allow the people downstream to use the water? So the Raisa says, if the upstream people, if only they can drink or the downstream people can drink, the upstream people can keep the water to drink, and they don't have to let the downstream people drink. Now, if there's enough for all of them to drink, and the upstream people want it for their animals, and then there won't be enough for the downstream people to have for their animals, they don't have to allow it. They can give it to their animals upstream, and the downstream animals won't have anything to drink. Now, if there's enough water for drinking for everybody and for animals for everybody, the upstream people wanted to wash the clothing, and then the downstream people won't be able to wash. Again, the upstream people can wash the clothing and don't have to leave any for the downstream people to wash. Now the Brisa says, what happens if the upstream people want to drink, feed the animals, and wash? And if they do that, then won't be enough for the downstream people to even drink. They're going to die of dehydration because the upstream people want to wash. They're allowed to do that. So Gemara says it's a machlokes. According to the Tanna Kamma, they have to allow the water to flow downstream so that the downstream people could have what to drink. According to Rabbi Yossi, they're allowed to wash with it, and they could tell the people that are downstream, too bad on you, not my problem. I'm washing my clothing. I don't care that you don't have anything to drink. So you see that Rabbi Yossi says that it's majorly important to wash your clothing. So how could you tell me that he holds it's not such a big deal to wash the body? Someone says, yes, it's not a kasha. Washing the clothing is even more important than washing the body. The Markot Shmuel talks about three types of uncleanliness and what they bring. Somebody who leaves his head unclean, doesn't wash his hair, that could bring blindness. Somebody who leaves his clothing unclean, that could bring insanity. Somebody who doesn't wash the body, that brings wounds and all kinds of abrasions and lesions. So the worst of the three is obviously insanity, which comes from unclean clothing, and therefore you got to make sure to clean your clothing.